All right. Verses 5 through 9. Where did we get to? Right here? Okay.
And thou shalt take fine flour, and bake 12 cakes thereof. 2 champ's deals shall be in 1 cake.
Back here.
Oh,
Next
me?
verse. Yes, ma'am.
And thou shalt set them in 2 rows, 6 on a row, upon the pure table before the Lord.
And thou shalt put pure frankincense upon each row, that it may be on the bread for memorial, even an offering made by fire unto the Lord.
Every Sabbath he shall set it in order before the Lord continually, being taken from the children of Israel by an everlasting covenant.
And it shall be Aaron's and his sons, and they shall eat it in the holy place. For it is most holy unto him of all the offerings of the Lord, made by fire by a perpetual statute.
So the children of Israel would provide the flour. It was a very specific type of flour, very fine flour. Some historians believe that it was unleavened bread, but it doesn't always clarify that. Just throw that out there. There was a group of ladies and men who would work together to make this bread. They would give it to the priest. The priest would come in every Sabbath, take the old bread over here, give it to another priest, would stand there and hold it. They would place the new bread on the table, and then as they would step back, there was 12 of these round loaves. They're very, very thin. There was 12 of these, one for each tribe. Okay? In other words, they believed that the presence of God was to be distributed to everyone. There was one that represented each tribe. And so the priest would gather, and one of the priests would hold the bread, and they would all hold hands, getting like a circle, or just, I couldn't find if it was an exact circle or square, you know. They would hold hands. And they would stand there together and thank God for all of his provisions. Then they would begin to distribute the bread, and they would begin to break it and pass it out.
Old bread?
The old bread. The old bread. And then they would eat it. The rule was you could take it home to your families if there was any leftovers. One of the original rules was that it had to all be eaten there, but then there was some provisions made for them to take it home so their families could enjoy it also. So, did it get old? Well, the worst case scenario, it was 7 days old. So, yes ma'am.
This doesn't have anything to do with that, but I don't know. What happens to our leftover communion bread?
I knew that was going to come up.
It's just put in the box with the tissue and left till the next week. It's not destroyed.
You got something else to say?
No,
No?
it's interesting.
Okay.
But all sorts of stuff, these breads, sometimes these
Right.
crackers.
Right.
Yeah, they're little
Yeah,
cracker
traditions
bread.
have really changed along the way.
Yeah.
Okay, now, this is something that's really, really interesting. So I was doing some word study, and I'm looking up the word cake. It's called cake. This showbread is also referred to as a cake. The word cake, the original Hebrew word is chalal, and it means punctured, pierced, bored, wounded, or perforated cake.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
So they need it before they.
Well,
But
that's
it's
Jesus.
Jesus.
Yeah.
We're getting there, aren't we?
Perforation.
Yeah, we're seeing it. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Or like you do a pie crust before you cook it.
Uh-huh.
Puncture it
You
all.
have your, Sally got your fancy iPad
I got my fancy iPad.
Bible ready there? Isaiah 53.
You want it in that Old Testament?
I don't care what it's in.
Yeah.
I think it's Isaiah 53. I better look it up real quick.
This is true.
I'm trying to go off.
There it is, Isaiah 53. Keep going, what verse?
I was way off. Zechariah 12.
That's no
I'm
good.
getting ahead of myself. Isaiah 53 is the prophecy of where Jesus was beaten. That's not the exact one.
Got it.
All right, this is Jehovah God speaking through the prophet Zechariah. Read that.
The spirit of grace and of supplications,
And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Then that,
Anybody catch anything in there?
Well, yeah, it's talking about something that's gonna happen later in the New Testament.
And they shall look upon me whom they have.
Pierced.
Uh-huh.
That very same verse is in what I'm gonna study tomorrow night in Revelation.
There you go.
so tell me what that is again?
That's Zechariah 12 and 10.
But repeat what she said for people that don't hear,
Okay, this is a prophecy through Zechariah.
right?
God said, they're going to look upon me whom they have pierced.
Yeah.
Okay? So the bread was, we've already picked out here, it literally means pierced or bored through. Wounded. Yes.
So
How about that?
time, the showbread represented Jesus.
Ah. Now, these folks, at the time, though, they have no clue.
No clue, yeah.
But God does it.
Oh, he had this plan all worked out. So this is why this whole series is called Jesus in the Tabernacle. It's how each element of the tabernacle represented something about Jesus. That's the beauty of it. Okay, let's keep going. Psalms 34, verse 8. Somebody read that one good and loud.
I think that's,
Go ahead.
okay. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him.
All right. Somebody else have a Bible want to look up 1 Samuel 21:6?
It's,
Yeah, it's right.
It's not on
It's
there.
on there.
It's not
It's
on there.
on here.
No, that's my comments.
oh,
1 Samuel 21:6. I see a page flipping back there.
do you have yours, Patty?
No, this one?
She's getting it. Okay. She's
Oh,
looking
she's
for
got
it.
it, okay. I got it. That these are his, I
Oh, okay.
Me too.
You got it?
Oh,
21:6.
21, okay.
I've got it first. So, the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. This is not King James.
It's all right. Who are we talking about here? Maybe a verse above it, I think it is.
David,
Ah. Y'all remember that story?
No, wait a minute.
David was running
Okay,
from
but-
Saul.
well, on the run, yeah.
But read it, can you read it again? Just-
Yeah, I'll start with 5. David replied, "Indeed, women have been kept from us as usual whenever I set out. So the men things are holy, even on missions that are not holy. So much more so today.
So he's talking to the priest.
So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away."
So it was leftover showbread, is that what you're saying?
Yep.
It was what?
David got hungry. He went to the temple. First thing he said was, "Is there a sword here?" And the priest said, "Well, there's Goliath's sword that you had me holding." He said, "Give me that sword." And he says, "By the way, do you have any bread we can eat? We're hungry. We're on the run." He's running for his life from Saul. And he goes, "Well, all we have is showbread, but are you holy?" One of the requirements before they could eat the holy bread is a man could not have had sex the previous 3 days. And David was saying, he goes, "No, trust me, we haven't been with a woman. we're good to go here. Just give me the bread."
He was hungry.
Yeah, he was hungry. And so the priest gave David, now I thought it was interesting because here it's called the bread of the presence. And then it says that this was bread that had been replaced with hot bread. So this is on the Sabbath, because that's the day they replaced it. These little details that come together. Okay, now here's the crazy thing. David wrote Psalms 34 in the cave right after he left the temple. So David wrote, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good," probably while he's chewing on that showbread. Because he had just left the temple. Now, how many times do we quote that verse, or have you heard it quoted? "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." And we have no idea the context of it. But the context of it was, this is the first time David's ever eaten this. Because he wasn't a priest, his family wasn't a priest, there's no way he would have been allowed to eat this bread. He had to convince the priest to give it to him. He's going, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. He knows what he's eating. He understands this is some special bread right here.
That is so good.
It is.
Isn't that interesting? Just the way it just kind of livens up. Any questions about it? Anybody? Everybody okay with it?
You don't think him asking where the sword was had anything to do with the priest giving him the bread, do you?
Yeah.
What'd you say, Mary?
I wondered if him asking the priest where the sword was, if that had
Oh.
anything to do with it.
Yeah, the fact he had a sword in his hand.
Give me the
Yeah.
bread.
I love that though because it was Goliath's sword.
Yeah.
Why did he ask for the sword?
He didn't have one. He was on the run. He didn't have a sword. He's like, you got a sword here? He's like, yeah, we got over the mantle. I've got.
Goliath's sword.
You brought me Goliath's sword before. Give me that one.
But the showbread, the old showbread,
Uh-huh.
that was over 7 days old,
Uh-huh.
still had the presence of God,
Yes. It still represented the presence of God.
no matter how old it was.
No matter what.
They could only, I thought they could, I mean, what you just said, they could only.
That day.
He's eating it. He's in there on the Sabbath day. Yeah. Yeah. I think I skipped that detail earlier. Is it could be taken home, but it had to be eaten that day.
Okay,
Couldn't hold it over the week.
okay.
So why could David and his men eat the bread? I mean, I thought
Well,
it was
first of all,
just
if you study Abiathar, I think is his name, the priest, he was pro-David.
Okay,
He understood David was anointed to be the king. He understood all of that. And so he made an exception to the rule. But even then, he said, well, I'll make an exception, but
are
have you been with a woman?
Okay.
And David's like, no, trust me. We're good. So,
And the bread had already been replaced.
right. Yeah, he was not eating fresh bread. He was eating the leftovers.
Okay.
So,
Oh, okay, that makes sense, okay.
yeah. Okay, Numbers chapter 4, verse 7. Somebody read that one there on the paper.
And upon the table of showbread they shall spread a cloth of blue, and put thereon the dishes, and the spoons, and the bowls, and covers to cover with.
And I'm just clicking on the words and doing word studies. And I learned that the word bowls there, it wasn't just any kind of bowl. Now remember I told you there was a dish there that had frankincense in it. But then there was bowls. I'm like, what's the bowl for? And when I did the word study on it, the word bowl there means a sacrificial basin for holding blood.
Holding what?
Blood.
Oh, right here.
They would sacrifice the lamb, and then they would bring in a portion of the blood, and they would set it there. What are you going to thank God for concerning blood? Forgiveness?
Forgiveness, because you put his hand on the
Yeah.
lamb before he.
Put his hand on the lamb, they drain the blood out, they take a portion of that blood, they take it to there. Now, this is something that's really interesting, is did you read anywhere in here where it said to have wine there?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Why is the cloth blue?
Royalty, not just royalty, but divine royalty. It's a color that Israel uses to depict the glory of God. You'll see that a lot. Like on their prayer shawls, they've interwoven it with blue. To them, it also represents the sky, which is where God lives. The blue sky, and that's how they draw that together. So not only are we talking about the presence of God, they've got the color that represents the glory of God. So, I would imagine it would be very beautiful. So this is pretty interesting. Now, before we jump to New Testament here, any questions right now? Anything? I've given you a whole lot in 35 minutes. A lot of foundational stuff here.
So what did they do with the blood that was in the bowl? On the
A
table?
lot of people believe that that's the blood that they end up taking into, they sprinkle around the altar of incense. We'll talk about that. And then once a year they take it into the mercy seat, and the high priest would sprinkle it there. They would take that blood because, like Hebrews tells us, that without the shedding of for any sins to be forgiven. And so they would take that blood. They didn't want the blood to burn up in the sacrifice, so they would take that blood. And then they had provisions for what to do with it after that, because they wouldn't just dump it on the ground. They had special things. I think I've told you before, they wouldn't just throw the ashes on the ground. You know, they had specific rules about what to do with the ashes and what to do with the extra blood. They were very, very meticulous about how they process all this.
So did the blood stay there for the 7 days too?
You know, I couldn't find that. I couldn't see that exactly. I could see that, I mean, there's daily sacrifices, so that could
So
be
that
swapped
could
out
be, yeah,
probably.
okay.
These are good questions. Anybody else? Anything else?
Well, it talks about in Numbers, drink offerings.
Yes,
also,
ma'am.
But that's not, you didn't include that.
It does talk about drink offerings. They could stand there with drink offerings, and there was multiple types of drink offerings. It wasn't just from grapes. They had other stuff. Some Hebrews, you study them out, they would have any kind of fruit juices. They would mix them all up. But we'll see the significance of the blood in the bowl in a little bit. And you'll see, and it'll make sense.
Okay.
But they definitely did, and they even would stand there sometimes. For the sake of time, I didn't include all of this because they're just way too much. But they would even stand there with certain drinks, and instead of drinking them, they'd pour them out on the ground. As a Lord, this is yours. I'm not going to drink what belongs to you.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. There's another story about David. They were running, and he said, "Oh, if I could have a drink from the springs of Bethlehem," and two of his men went and got him a drink. They give it to him, and he went, "Nah, you fought too hard for this. It'd be an insult to you if I drank the water you got for me, so none of us get it." And he poured it out.
Oh, gosh.
Like, we just risked our lives for you. Pour it out on the water.
Yeah.
But that was something they would do as an honor. They would honor God. I can't drink what belongs to you. We'll give it back to your earth, kind of a deal. Kind of interesting. All right, so now let's go to the New Testament. We see multiple examples of bread in the New Testament. I've only picked out 3 scriptures to go with this. John chapter 6, verse 35.
And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst.
Underline where it says, I am the bread.
Seeing God in the bread again, aren't
I am the bread. There's no question to the folks that he's talking to. These are Hebrew people. They get it. They don't have to wonder, what kind of bread is he talking about, right? You know, like, there's no way there's a question in their mind. When he says, I'm the bread of life, every one of them knew exactly what he was talking about. I'm that bread on that table. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Luke chapter 22, verses 19 and 20. Patty, I think we're back to you.
And he took bread, and gave thanks, and brake it, and gave unto them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me.
Okay, let's stop for a second. Now, the old table of showbread, what did I tell you they would do at the table? What was the whole purpose for standing there and
Give thanks.
give thanks?
For God's provision.
Break it and give thanks for provisions. Up here earlier when you read about the frankincense, it says that it may be bread for a memorial, remembering what God's done. This do in remembrance of me. He's got his disciples there, and he is literally acting out the role of the priest at the table of showbread. This is my body. Okay? He broke it. This do in remembrance. This is a memorial. Remember my provisions. They got that. All right, verse 20.
Is it to me?
Have you read? Yeah, go ahead.
Likewise also the cup after supper, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you.
This is our communion.
This is my blood. Well, the cup happened to be wine that he had there. You see, earlier it was wine. That's where we draw the connection of the wine and the blood. The bowl on the table was blood. And when he held up the cup, he said, "Here's your blood, boys.
Did they drink it?
This is the blood." But it was wine. That's where he passed the cup.
Right, yes, he did.
Remember, at the Lord's Supper, we call it.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, here's my cup. These guys get it. They don't have to wonder, what kind of blood's he talking about? He's breaking bread. Say, this is a memorial. Do this in remembrance of me. Here's the blood. And this was a place that none of them were allowed to go into. They had only heard about it. They had been taught about it. Any Jewish boy that's at least 12 years old had to be able to fully explain everything in here and quote the scriptures about it. They all fully got this. They understand what's happening there in that moment. Jesus has literally become the table of showbread for them. I'm the bread on that table. I'm the blood on that table. Wow. I was sharing this with a pastor friend of mine last Thursday, I guess it was. He said, "Wait a minute." And he's processing. He said, "I've been in church all my life." This guy's in his 30s. "I've been in church all my life. I've been in ministry for almost 10 years. I've never heard this. Never seen this." This is a pastor. So if you've never heard this, don't feel bad. There's pastors out there that have never put these two things together and realized that Jesus was not there at that table, the Last Supper or whatever we call it, where this is happening there. He is not creating or initiating or inventing the idea of communion. He reached back into the Old Testament in the Tabernacle and said, "We're going to have this in the New Testament too." But the deal with it now is, it's for whosoever will. Now it's not just for priests. He offered it to the boys, the fishermen, the tax collector, the publicans, whoever was, even Judas, who he knew was about to betray him. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say, at that time, the difference in the Old Testament showbread and the New is that he became the showbread.
Yes.
His blood was,
Yes.
it was his blood then.
Yes.
He became the sacrifice, the
Yes.
sacrificial lamb.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the difference.
That's it right there.
And I keep wondering how many of them it took until after the crucifixion before it hit.
Before it
them.
clicked.
Yeah,
And for some, it never did,
Yep.
right.
which is unfortunate.
Because there on that cross, he was pierced. He was wounded for our transgressions.
And broken.
Broken. All of those things happened right there. There's the bread being broken. There it is being pierced. There it is.
Being poured out.
And then you go back to Zechariah and God said, "You're going to look on me, whom you pierced."
So it's just a total fulfillment of.
Because it was the bread of the face, the bread of the presence. And then sure enough, there on that cross, Jesus looked at his disciple one day and he said, "If you've seen me, you've seen the Father." There he was on the cross. Wow.
Were the two robbers that were on the cross with him, the other two, were they Hebrew or do we know?
We have no idea of knowing. No way of knowing.
I just know one accepted him and one didn't.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is that's Old Testament still. Because the New Testament did not start until his resurrection. When he said it is finished, that ended the Old Testament.
Okay.
Because all of that was fulfillment. Everything in his life was fulfillment, and then he said it is finished.
And that's when the curtain tore.
That's when the curtain tore.
And the
And that's when we're going to walk into the Holy of Holies. Yeah. Old saints started popping up out of the grave, all kinds of crazy stuff started happening. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Resurrections.
What's the frankincense? Did I miss that?
Frankincense was it was kind of like an oil that was, it wasn't just for smelling. But a lot of times the Hebrews would use frankincense as the concept of remembrance.
Okay.
Once you smell it, you ain't gonna forget it.
Used for a bomb.
Weren't you more?
It's a balm, yes,
It
it's
was
used
so
for all kinds of stuff.
expensive. That was
Mhm.
very, very expensive. I mean, like
one time they said it was like a year's wages or more.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah. You know, if you think about this table, I think about how even the bottom of it was covered in gold. Nobody's gonna see that. But God has particular hands, everything. So now we've seen Jesus, and then we look at the New Testament church. And that's where we go into 1 Corinthians, where Paul is teaching them. We had this discussion a little bit last week. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 28 and 29. Back to Mary.
Let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread, and drink of that cup.
For he that eateth and drinketh unworthily, eateth and drinketh damnation to himself, not discerning for the Lord's body.
And I wanted to show y'all something. The word unworthily simply means irreverently, or as Rick Lovall opinion, if you want to call it that. If you reject the idea of Calvary, and you reject the idea that he shed his, or you're not taking it seriously, then in that moment, you don't need to be touching it. But here's the beauty of it. When the priest would stand at this table, and he would thank God, that was his moment with God. He's eating this bread. This is his moment, where he is literally communing with God. He's having his moment of fellowship with God at this table. This is just him and God. He's not praying for other people. That's the altar of incense. We'll get to that later. He's not even asking for forgiveness. This is his moment of thanksgiving. You can't be thankful unless you're humble. He's got this moment of humbleness and reverence and respect and just, wow, you're so awesome. Thank you. It's a moment of pure worship. Okay? To me, if that's not your mindset about communion, don't touch it. Maybe you need to go pray or something to get your mind right, get your heart right. To me, that's this irreverent, unworthily. Okay? That's what it comes down to. I teach that communion, just like we're taught here, it's your moment with Jesus. Okay? I know a lot of people teach, this has become church tradition, that communion is the communion with us with each other. But that's not it at all. This is you with him. Into the altar and the laver. So he's been through the process. He must be holy. Paul's use of the word unworthily shows his understanding of the process of reverence. In other words, you didn't just go waltzing in the holy place. I'm here, boys. Coming in. No. Communion must be done reverently. The table of showbread is a beautiful picture of Jesus, Calvary, and our service of communion. May we all experience fellowship with Jesus, our bread of life. Questions? Comments? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the priest ate the showbread.
Mm-hmm.
Did they drink the blood?
No. They did not drink the blood.
Said he drank that cup.
That was Jesus, where he said, here's my cup, where he had grape juice or wine.
Okay.
Yeah. He said, this is the blood. And he showed wine, or grape juice.
So after he
Depends on how
drank
you
the blood.
look at that verse. May or may not have been fermented, I'll just tell you all that.
I don't think I've ever thought of or heard eateth and drinketh damnation to him. I mean, I'm sure
That's in
that
there.
I have taken communion unworthily in
In
my
the
life.
Catholic Church.
But probably not irreverently.
Well, maybe so. I don't know.
What about now, though?
Well,
What if you could take it right now?
Oh, I would hope, yeah. But I'm thinking, I've been taking communion since I was 12 years old.
Oh, good
See,
point.
this is where I believe this should be taught to everyone, so that you
Absolutely.
really understand the significance of it.
Mm-hmm.
Calvary wasn't a joking matter.
No.
No.
Why do you think, I mean, how many of you all in this room knew this? This is, why is it not being taught?
Well, I mean, part of it is being taught.
I'll tell you, I asked some pastor friends of mine, various church groups, we were talking about this. I said, why aren't y'all teaching this? And they said, well, frankly, I only have 20, 30 minutes on Sunday morning, how do I have time to teach all this?
This is important.
Exactly, and that's where I'm like, you can't afford to not teach it.
You know what, to know what you, this lesson, and then know New Testament communion, you can't take communion in the same way again.
No.
I mean, just to, like in our church, get up and walk. I mean, it changes your.
Somebody, and I really don't know the man's name, it was at a Christian retreat thing. And he taught them, no, he didn't teach this, but he taught how important communion was. That this became almost central, and that's when I stopped going to the Baptist church and started coming to the Christian church. And I told him, I said, if you'd have communion, I'd go. They said, we have it once a quarter. Once a quarter's not enough. But, and then, they taught this. This is the time that is between you and God. If I go to church, the most important thing to me is to do communion. As I said when Mary was our pastor, I said, I want to hear that pastoral prayer and get that communion. And once I did that, I could be Bill Lewis and leave.
You know, you just mentioned something, I remembered I left this out. In the Old Testament, they did this only on the Sabbath, okay? But Paul said, as often as you do it, it opened the door. Yes. You can receive communion every day. What I kind of caution against doing it too ritualistic, because it can kind of lose its oomph. I surprise our church with it. They never know when it's coming. And I'll teach some lesson on it or do something, and when we're in the right mindset. Because I don't want people just, whatever. I've done it to where I've had like families gather, and like somebody in the family, a man of the family or whoever, tell the story of the lamb, and break a piece of bread and give it to, as in teaching the children or teaching whoever. There's so many different ways to do it. The fact is that I really believe we need to understand where it come from.
Yeah.
And this is where it came from.
At Danelle's, Sandy, she's not here today, her daughter's wedding, they insisted that they have communion at her wedding. I mean,
I've seen that.
To me, that was so meaningful. It was the most meaningful part of the wedding, and it had a lot of other parts.
Any other questions, comments, anything?
We have it every week, I'm Southern Baptist, and we have it every week. And our minister reminds us not to take it unworthily every week. Because I think it says you can get, there are places in the New Testament that it says.
It's the following verse.
Yeah, it can.
Don't be surprised if you get sick after that.
Either sick or.
I've been trying to find it,
death,
because I was
it says.
like you, I've never
It
heard
is.
it that, what you had, drinketh damnation. So
Yeah.
I finally found the Revised Standard Version.
Yeah.
Let a man examine himself, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body, eats and drinks judgment upon himself. That is why many of you are weak and ill, and some have died. That's probably more of what we've heard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the judgment.
And that's just the Revised Standard.
Yeah, that's a good version.
Yeah.
That's a good.
But we also have a time of, while they're preparing, then we have a time of asking forgiveness and getting our heart ready before we take communion. We don't just go up and take communion. I mean, it's
Well,
passed out, but it.
And we do take it every week in
You
our
may go up
church.
and take it, but you're independently doing it.
Yeah, you don't have to go forward at
Yeah.
all. You don't have
I've-
to.
We
Just
don't go
because you go
forward.
forward
I was
doesn't
invited
mean
to
you're not
church.
being reverent.
That's right.
Once that they received communion, and I'm not going to say any names or even give you a hint of where it might have been. May have been in Sikeston, may not have been in Sikeston. I'm leave it blank. High-fiving kids, and like they made almost a game out of it. I was going, dear God, this is Calvary. You can't make a game out of this stuff. And if people think I'm too serious about it, sorry, I have a deep understanding of it.
So they treated it more like a celebration.
Yeah, but it,
Cheers.
yeah, it was just kind of a, and you could tell they weren't, it had nothing to do with this is my body, this is my blood, this is, I was broken in a sacrifice, and it was just, all right, let's just do it, you know, and I'm like, no, please, let me teach you. I can give you a whole new outlook on this. This is what I felt to do today. I felt that we should close this out by, maybe we're Elizabeth, and we've had this revelation that, you know, there's times I probably did take it for granted. I think we all need to pray our own prayers right now and say, Lord, if I ever did take it for granted, I'm sorry. I understand now. And I will never again ever just blow off communion as if, let's hurry and get this over with. Let's pray. For this